Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our first podcast. The 3 a.m. idea continues with a plethora of people from all over the world contributing to it, and for that, I am very thankful. For those of us who are new to the story, we're creating an app that helps people stay safe, productive, and invested in their neighborhoods. We're starting this podcast because there are people out there that have tremendous insight into this topic. People from law, tech, design, just to name a few. And we want to use their novel ideas to constantly evolve the app and raise awareness. This is a chill podcast. It's meant to help you stay engaged on this topic in a very relaxed way. We care about your mental health. It's also a safe place for diverse ideas and solutions. The more perspectives we hear, the more our end users will benefit.
The culture within policing today can be easily fixed, at least in my estimate. My name is Melvin Russell. I'm a retired Baltimore police chief, one of the chiefs of the community component of the department, the Baltimore City Police Department, as well as I was the acting deputy commissioner of the administrative side at the time of my retirement in June of 2019. What I have found, and I'll be real brief with this, is the way we have lost our way is we stopped serving. 18,000 police departments across the country, and we all share the same mantra, sworn the same oath about protecting and serving. That's what we're supposed to do for the communities that we're policing. Protect them and serve them. But what I've seen over the last 20 or so years, the erosion of that oath, where we no longer serve the way we used to serve. There was a time, and I'm sure it wasn't just unique to Baltimore, that any police officer that you ran into 20 plus years ago, in that window, when I started my career in 1979, most officers were considered officer friendly. In other words, they were engaged with their communities. They were engaged with the young, the old, the black, the white, the good and the bad. Police knew everybody. That's how they became great officers, because they knew the makeup of the communities they were patrolling, the makeup of the communities they were investigating. They knew the players. They could separate the good from the bad, and that's what made them great officers. And they served those communities. They weren't just there to arrest. They weren't there as occupiers in those communities. They were actually part of the community by being partners with the community. But we have gotten away from that. Policing has laid down the service piece, and we stopped being service providers. And that sounds weird, but we were service providers. We stopped being social workers, thinking we didn't have to be social workers again. And no, we weren't trained in those areas, but it came as part of the duties because we were compassionate people. Somewhere along the way, we lost our compassion, and all we wanted to do was protect and protect. So you have a two-armed prong, protect and serve. We laid down the service arm and really concentrated on the protection arm. And that protection arm got so out of whack and so over-exercised, began to become very abusive. And it really became abusive in communities of color. Black and brown communities began to feel the power of a now out of whack policing arm that would arrest first and ask questions later. No more empathy, no more compassion. It just did what it thought it could do. You have police officers no longer coming from the communities, living in the communities, heck, not even being part of the towns and the cities. They're coming from other parts of the country, and they're coming in trying to police communities. They have no idea how these communities came to be. They don't know the history of the communities, and yet they're policing these communities. And oftentimes, they find out about these communities by searching the internet, asking questions of people who weren't probably as knowledgeable as they should have been. And most police officers come into the field of policing, and I'm not going to say most, but a lot of them come into the field being afraid, especially if you come from parts of the country where you don't interact with a lot of brown and black people. And now you coming into those parts. And the way media depicts brown and black people, you see a lot of violence, you see a lot of negativity, because that's what sells. Let's be truthful about it. If you pick up a magazine, you pick up a story about any communities, most communities are going to be negatively depicted. And so the way we get back to engagement with these communities, with the people that make up the communities, create a presence again, like we used to do when I first started policing, and many, many years after that, You have to have an engaged presence, because right now what I'm seeing, not only in Baltimore but across this country, we're seeing relationships that are now bankrupt. We don't have relationships without law enforcement officers anymore. But the funny thing is, that's just not law enforcement, that's across the spectrum. Communities don't have relationships with each other anymore. It wasn't like most of us who are my age generation, where the community helped raise those kids. You could be in anybody else's home, you could play in the neighborhood and get fed by people in the neighborhood, you could be admonished by people in the neighborhood, and everybody got along with everybody looked out for each other, and now nobody does that. Today everybody's afraid. You can't even knock on your neighbor's door because you don't know who they are, and you're afraid they're gonna shoot you just because you might ask them to turn down the music. So there's a lack of relational equity. We don't have that. It's much like going to a bank. The bank has exactly what you need. You go in and say, can I withdraw $100? But because you didn't put anything into the bank, it can't give you what you didn't invest into. Police officers no longer invest in the communities. They no longer help the youth in the community. They no longer try to help the elderly in the community. They no longer sit down on the stoops of the residents and learn their stories. They no longer get out of their car and play ball with the kids in the middle of the street or in a playground. Now they just run from call to call to call, figuring they got all the answers, and we're no longer relatable. We're not relatable because we come from the suburbs. We come from communities that we think are much safer and think we're much better than other folk. And so we kind of look down on people who maybe don't have as much as we do. We have to get back to an engaged presence. We have to get back to building up that relational equity. If we just learn to do that, build up relational equity, learn to police with compassion, then we can get back to a healing nation. We can get back to policing the way we're supposed to police. Until we care about one another, until the churches get back in line, until the schools care about our young people, until we realize everybody has a backstory, we're never ever going to get back to a place where we see healthy policing in our country and just healthy relationships across the border. So I say to you that if you want to make a difference, get to know your police officers, even if you don't like them or don't think they're part of your community. Help them, because they don't know how to engage. It's not like when I was a young police officer. I came from the city I policed in. I came from the communities I policed. Help those officers become part of your community. Yes, you take the first steps, because policing is a proud profession. Too much pride to sometimes say, hey, I need help. And because we're all traumatized, we don't think we need help from anybody else unless they carry a badge like we do. Because when you carry a badge, you think you have all the authority, you think you have all the power, when the power actually belongs to the people. So until we can become one with the people again, we need the people to help us become one with them. So I love you. I don't know if this will help you, but this is what we have to get back to. That engaged presence to bring back relational equity in our communities.
You're listening to the Social Proof Podcast.